Record, Madison. Thank you so much. All right, so now to get into the presentation here, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Roanne Whitticase. I am the grants coordinator for F2SBC, BC, and some of you might also know me as the community animator for North Central and Northwest. And then I'll let Marcus introduce himself here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus Lobb. I'm provincial manager of Farm to School BC and was also at one time a community animator for the Central Island region and the Capital region here on Vancouver Island.
Thanks, Marcus. So yeah, I'd like to begin by with my territorial acknowledgement of being really grateful to be presenting today from the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Kwalisane Nation, a part of the Dekel people, and I'm here on the so-called Prince George, BC, North Central. And I'd just like to say Musi Cho to everyone for being here today, which is thank you in the Dekel language. And Marcus.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Again, presenting today from the homeland of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, but also just the general Coast Salish peoples, which includes the WSÁNEĆ, the Lekwungen, modern day Songhees, and the Esquimalt nations, and I'm sixth generation settler. And so I'm just residing just outside of Victoria.
Thank you, Marcus. So for the agenda to go for today, we're going to do a brief introduction about our program, our team, and our hubs model at Farm to School BC. Then we're going to do an overview of some of our food literacy programs that we have available. And then we're going to go through some of the Farm to School BC grant like ideas and programs that you can apply for with some grant writing tips. And then we'll have an opportunity to go into some breakout rooms where our community animators on the call here will help facilitate. So you can go in there and ask more questions or have a good discussion there. And I'd also just like to add that you can add, say hello in the chat, also add your territorial acknowledgement so we can all know who's here on the call with us today. And also if you want to add any questions or comments along the way in the chat, Madison will be monitoring that and we'll also take note of anything there. And I will be following up after the webinar to everyone that has registered for the webinar with some answers to some more questions and some follow-up there. So to introduce Farm to School BC as a program, we're a program that brings healthy, local, and sustainable food into schools across BC. And we provide students with hands-on learning, or we support those that do, and with opportunities that develop food literacy. And we like to focus on strengthening local food systems and enhancing the school community connectedness while we are supporting the educators in the schools. And farm school activities do differ by school and the uniqueness of those communities, but they always do include the following core elements of our program, which are healthy local foods, hands-on learning, and school community connectedness. And Farm to School BC is a program of the Public Health Association of BC, which is supported by the province of BC and the Provincial Health Services Authority. And our program has now been active for 16 years, started in 2007, actually up in North Central in Quesnel, BC, with a bunch of passionate individuals on the ground. And there's now 330 Farm to School BC programs across BC, and 22 school districts are supported, and we're always hoping to continue to expand and grow. And so to introduce you to some of our team, you've met Marcus here on the call. Kaylin is our food literacy advisor, and Madison, who is also helping out with webinar today, who's on the call, is our communications coordinator. Then we have our team of animators here. So all the animators on the call, everyone wave and say hello, and you'll probably get to meet them in the breakout rooms as well. And the animators, we have different hubs across the province, on the island and down south and up here. We have the North Central and Northwest hubs. And again, we want to support the whole province. So if you don't fall within these hubs, you can reach out to Marcus or myself, and specifically to the grants today. Yeah, don't hesitate to connect with me as the grants coordinator. And if you are within these hubs, you can also reach out to your animators for support with your program and ideas. And so now I'm going to invite Marcus to speak to some of our food literacy programs at Farm to School BC.
Yeah, I just wanted to take an opportunity to both showcase some of the resources we have on the website that might be useful for you as educators, but also could sort of drum up ideas for potential projects, things you want to see funded, et cetera. So just on here, these are some examples of different programs that we've funded in the past. School gardens, indoor growing, which could look like microgreens. It can look like starting seedlings, grow towers, et cetera. Field trips, land to school and sea to school. So these are aspects of connections more to the land itself or to waterways itself, and curriculum connections. On our website, you can find all of these resources when you look underneath starting a program or teacher resources. There's all kinds of program ideas there, activity guides, curriculum connections, school garden mentorship program, which is really a support system, a series of webinars about maintaining educational garden spaces, and there's all kinds of webinar recordings in there, et cetera. So a wealth of information there if you want to go visit and any of the areas of the drop-down menu there. If you were to go into curriculum connections, you will get to see a number of different further drop downs, which includes in the classroom, in the garden, on the land, or in the connections. And so these are focused on specific areas in which you might want to make connections to your classroom. So there's plenty of different resources. We also have activities and resources based on seasonal activities. So if you go and you look as well on the website there, you'll see spring, fall, and winter activities. So there's lesson plans in there, further links to connect to other resources that you may want to bring into your classroom. The Learning from the Land Toolkit's a great document. Hold on one second. I got a barking dog going crazy here. Just a sec.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, dogs. Part of life. So yeah, the Learning from Land Toolkit, this is a great resource. Oh, and Marcus is back.
Sorry about that. It was a battle between dog and cat that was going to go into eternity. So Learning from the Land Toolkit is a document we created in partnership with Ministry of Agriculture a few years ago, and it highlights a few different examples of ways in which Indigenous plants and pedagogies can be connected to the classroom. So that's on our website. It's really a fun style of program to get involved in, is starting Indigenous plant gardens and tie in reconciliation work into it. So just another resource that's out there in case this is something you're interested within there. There's budget templates, all kinds of ideas about ways in which you could build out a garden like this, including links to places to source materials and things like that. Similar, we also have a guide related to growing school farms. We just are in the process of launching this, so it's really quite a new resource, but it's essentially quite an in-depth document that showcases a few different examples across the province of school farms. So growing spaces that are being approached with a little bit more of a high yield intention, and connecting farmers to the classroom, connecting to what they're growing potentially into cooking classes or cafeteria. And then just a few other resources just to point out that are kind of useful for those who are especially passionate about school gardens. We have our crop planning resources here, which are a series of cards and calendars that help you think about when to plant and how to do it with students, and some just little tips. And you can definitely build out resources and lesson plans out of these cards. And one of the big resources that really connects into the classroom is our hands-on food. It was developed with the vetting of teachers in mind. And that's also sort of an adjacent website that you can look at. Lots of lesson plans and curriculum connections, especially into the cooking aspect of things. But we have it broken up into a few different categories here. So it's just further ways to, even if you're developing a project, ways to actually make it be have educational kind of connections.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, now I'm going to shift more into project and program kind of ideas or categories that our program tends to support. And I have listed here, you'll see how it says farm to school, food to school, land to school, sea to school. And Marcus already spoke to this, but they're just different ways to kind of speak to the greater food literacy and trying to support that student educator connection to foods and the land and teachings in and around that. So I'm going to go through a few categories here. So school gardens is definitely a very popular focus that a lot of people are really interested in. So with school gardens, we definitely support this work, but then school gardens can come in many forms and we support those. So school gardens don't have to necessarily be large scale food production gardens. They can be explorer gardens where you have the garden with perennial annuals, flowers, and it can be a space for exploration to learn and play. And kids can even get their hands dirty. And if anyone knows of Megan Zenny, they can hide little dinosaurs throughout and just get kids exposed and in there with the plants. Indigenous plant gardens is another one which Marcus spoke to with learning land toolkit that can be connected. Food production gardens. So this is one that a lot of schools do take on, where they establish the gardens with the intention of bringing some of that food into their meal programs or the cafeteria. Outdoor classrooms with gardens. So this can be setting up the garden with the intent of also having outdoor classroom teachings in there, so the design can be much different. Pollinator gardens is a great one. This could be where you plant fall, spring flower bulbs with students, and then the flowers grow, and they can, lots of teachings in and around that healthy ecosystem of a garden. And seed saving gardens. This is a really good one where you can plant all kinds of plants and just let them bolt and go to seed throughout the summer and come back in the fall, let them dry, and have students kind of see that life cycle go through and harvest those seeds for the next spring. And food forests, where it's kind of those perennial spaces where you're developing those like long-term investment gardens there. And so for examples of what we have funded before, or sorry, this one I also just wanted to highlight here when we're talking about school gardens. This is another one of our resources specifically to school gardens, is our school garden mentorship program. So this is a great resource if you are interested in developing a school garden or advancing your school garden for ideas, inspiration, and learning. So it's on our website. It's an online access and it's full of webinar recordings and we do it live, but this year's one is over heading into winter, but it'll start up again. And those will be live at that point. And when they are live, they have great discussion groups. But even before it gets back going, there's all the recordings, there's great resources, workbooks and guides, lesson plans in there. And you can always reach out to us with questions around that program as well. And so for examples of what we've funded in the past for school gardens, and again, these aren't extensive lists of, but just examples for inspiration here, is we funded materials for gardens. So from the beds to the plants themselves, composters, infrastructure. So that could be setting up like drip irrigation with timers, the actual garden boxes, garden signage, greenhouses, hand tools that you might need, big and small. This can also be just support mentorship that can help with the development of your garden, and then actual programming and activities and lessons that you connect to that. And that can be like farmers, Indigenous knowledge keepers, and so honorarium can go towards that. And then also this can be for indoor gardens in the school. And these can be big or small. It can be both for in soil or hydroponic setups. And that could be, again, the infrastructure, seeds, plants, soil. And then cooking and meals. So in this category, we've definitely supported like harvesting plants and then the food processing of those. So that could be, integrating the foods from your garden and the foraging with supplies, cooking activities, doing the food processing, running meal programs, setting up salad bars, and food celebrations. So examples of what this might look like and how we funded that can be cooking equipment. Blenders is a really fun one for kind of integrating all kinds of things together. Pots, pans, even kitchen utensils. Materials, I just list an example of building kind of your own like DIY drying rack, like a solar drying rack. I've had educators want to do that before, but you can be creative with what that can look like. You can use up to 20% of the grant to actually purchase food for food activities and cooking. And again, it can go towards supporting that honorarium and the mentorship component of the activities in and around cooking. So we also support the scope of like field trips and foraging and connecting to the land. So this can be like visiting farms or community gardens, other community food spaces that might be around cooking, food processing, and connecting with community food. So we will definitely support that. And how we've done that in the past for field trips, covering travel costs is a big one because that can be a barrier for many to get out there to great locations to visit these different farms, materials that you might need for hands-on engagement at these locations, and again, the honorarium costs for time of people that are supporting the field trip or at the location, and for foraging as well, the travel and specific equipment you might need for that. And then also, I know one activity that a few schools I'm connected with have engaged in is harvesting the native plant species from the surrounding ecosystems to plant in their indigenous plant gardens. And with this also, of course, respecting local protocols. So this is where the honorarium piece can come into play in having that those elders and those knowledge keepers and those people of indigenous communities to support that trip out to do that, or to support them doing that with and for you for your garden there. And for Indigenous programs, we've supported, this can be Indigenous plant gardens and food forests, connecting to the land and foraging, food preservation, cultural and language signage for Indigenous gardens or gardens of any kind, and even if that is at a location for a field trip and other places where students might be connected to, connecting with that language there. And again, with that honorarium for support, knowledge keepers and elders in these teachings. And what we funded before in this kind of category of Indigenous programs is with Indigenous gardens, it's essentially the same as supporting any other garden. So that could be like the actual equipment, materials, soil, garden beds, and then the harvesting of native plants from the lands, or purchasing plants and seeds, and as well for the honorarium of the elders and knowledge keepers for this process, and like we mentioned before, for the traveling and the foraging equipment and time. And then also for cooking and preservation of foods, so like smokehouses or smoke pits, canning equipment, food dehydrators. And again, these are just examples, so you can definitely, programs are unique, you can get creative with this, but these are things we have funded with these programs in the past. And we also support school to community connecting. So with this, connecting with people and places that might be in your community. So a question that we're often asked is, when you're applying for a grant, if it's connected with a community organization, is that eligible? And it definitely can be. Schools are the ones that have to be applying and managing the funds of the project. But for example, if there's a community garden that is right by your school and you're like highly connected with a community group, and your school they're letting you use, say, like a handful of the garden beds at this community garden, and you have that connection there, then the funds can go to connecting and supporting your program at that space. So, and because these can be very diverse as well, you can always just send me an email if you have questions about how that can fall into place. But we definitely want to support those relationships and those connections. And so it can also be in the field trip category that we mentioned, in terms of the indoor-outdoor activities and visiting farms, for those teaching experiences that can go beyond what you might be able to offer at your school location. And also for that, the food and the cooking, again, connecting to, say, commercial kitchens or spaces where you might not be able to engage in those activities at your school. So now I'm going to shift into speaking more specifically to our grants and in applying for our grants this year. So our Farmers Literacy grants, we offer the two categories. So we have the $3,000 grant and the $1,000 grant. So in previous years, the $3,000 grant was called our startup grant, and the $1,000 grant was called the scale up grant. So it's essentially the same. So if you've had one of these in the past. They are just now open as the 3,000 and the 1,000. And so the grant applications for this year are due November 15th at 11:59. So eligibility for our grants is pretty open. You just have to be a K-12 school located in British Columbia. And the only things that can make you non-eligible for our grants outside of that is if you've received one of our $1,000 or $3,000 grants in the past. So if you have received one of our $3,000 grants in the past, then you must have completed the final report of that $3,000 grant to be able to apply for our other $1,000 grant. And the same in respect to the $1,000, and if you've had that one, and then you can be eligible for the $3,000. So you can have both of them once for your school, the $1,000 and the $3,000. And this is not a requirement, but we do highly encourage that if you are within the hubs, that there is a regional animator, to reach out to and connect with your regional animator just to discuss your project and any ideas, and then also to connect for ongoing support by the animator of your project. So for our $1,000 and $3,000 grants, the difference between the two and why you might apply for one over the other mostly comes down to the scope of your project, both maybe in timeline and in what you're trying, your project is investing in. So for the $1,000 grants, the timeline is about 9 months. So these are great for projects and activities or field trips and investments that might have smaller goals and shorter timelines, or for minor additions to existing programs. So this can be if you have an established garden, but you want to make additions to that or enhancements to that, or expand to the elements that connect the garden into the kitchen. This is where the $1,000 grant might be great. And for the $3,000 grants, the timeline is around 16 months. So this is better, more applicable for larger grants with like a more elaborate and very clear vision. So these might require more time in planning to complete the overall project. And they typically rely on a school community and maybe even external support from the connecting to community stakeholders to help with the overall project. And they can also be, for example, part of a larger project. So we've had schools that apply for the $3,000 and it's part of a larger greenhouse project, as an example. So key dates and reporting for our grants this year. So everyone that will be receiving a grant will be notified by December 15th, and your funds will arrive in January. So reporting for the grants for the $3,000 grant, because it's a larger project, we do have both a midterm and a final report. The midterm report is due October 31st and the final in May of 2025. And for the $1,000 grant, we only have the final report that is due in October. So to introduce some documents and tools, so we do have, when you go into either the $1,000 or $3,000 grant application, links on our website. We have for reference the grant application forms, and we highly encourage that you download these and that you go through them and you answer the questions beforehand, because when you are applying for grants online, you start and finish that in the single application there, and that takes about an hour for the $3,000 grant and maybe close to for the $1,000 grant. And this can also just help with having other people on your team help you get the grant application ready. And then we also have the budget form. This is required to be uploaded when you are applying for your grant, so you can download this as well and fill it out before you do your application, and then you upload it at the end. And so the budget form for the grant, it's quite simple in that we just want to see the key things that are part of how you're spending our grant funds. So we do have different categories here that you can see that you can put your items within. And then we do have a few examples there just for inspiration and where things might lie within these different categories, where you can list all of your purchases and expenses. And then you can also see over there that we have the external funding component there. And that is mostly important for the larger $3,000 ones, but can be a part of both. And where this is applicable is, say if our $3,000 is a part of a greater like $10,000 greenhouse, for example. And this is where we would like to see where the additional funding for that $10,000 for the greenhouse is coming from, so that we can see that you are gaining the additional funds to be able to move that project forward. And in the notes section, this is also an opportunity to add, if you, for example, say you have any in-kind labor or people that are supporting that, that can show maybe where the reduction in expenses might be coming from to support the project. So for contact information, we're just highlighting this because the lead applicant for the grants, even if you are collaborating with a community organization, it has to be from the applying school. We also just want to point out that the co-lead applicant needs to be somebody that is involved and knowledgeable and a part of the project, because if the lead applicant, if they're no longer a part of the program by the end when the reporting happens, then the co-lead applicant will be the primary contact who we will be reaching out to. And here I'm just going to go through a few application questions that are a little bit more detailed. So in the project plan section, for both the $1,000 and $3,000 grants, we have a question that's asking you to express how you will use the grant to achieve your overall goals of the program. So we asked you to list your goals and key deliverables that you will use to meet them. So for the $1,000 grant, this question is where you can list your goals, like key actions that you will take to achieve those goals, and any timeline milestones that will map out the program within the timeline of the $1,000 grant. And on the $3,000 grant, because this is usually larger programs, we have it kind of broken up into two. So for this one, in this question, this is where you can list your goals and the key actions that you'll take to align with those goals. And then we have a question 3, and that's where we ask you to list the milestones and timelines so you can break that down into more detail. And then for question number 2, this is on both of the grant applications. We ask you to express how you will align your program with the 3 core pillars of Farm to School BC. And those again are the healthy local foods, hands-on learning, and school and community connectedness. And we do state that if you're unsure on how you think your project or program can align with these pillars, to explain why you don't think that it's applicable, they will, and or how you're planning to maybe integrate that into the program in the future. And so this question might be less applicable to the $1,000 grants, where it could be an extension on an existing garden, for example, so it doesn't necessarily change, but you can list how the garden already is aligning with these, or how that extension might help enhance that. And for the $1,000 grant, it's an expectation that you do answer these questions, and you'll see in the application that there's 3 different, these are all in their own different categories to answer. And this is where you can also reach out to myself or the community animators for ideas on how that can be done, because often that can be where you can make those great community connections that can benefit the program. And then there's a question, and this is only on the $3,000 grant, but this is referring to sustainability. And we asked you to please share potential challenges that your project might face and how you might mitigate these to ensure that it's sustainable. So that could be, for example, connecting with community partners. Maybe your PAC is really supportive of the program. Maybe you have plans for fundraising, and maybe that's already connecting out to our community animators for support of the program. And we do really want to express that like every program and project will have some challenges along the way, and that sharing this and answering these questions transparently will not take away from your application. It will just help us be able to better support you in your program or project. And one other thing I wanted to just highlight here for the application questions, and this again is only in the $3,000 grant, is speaking to the successful, sustainable team for your program or project, because often it can come down to a few really passionate educators that take it on, and that can lead to it not being quite as sustainable if there's any changes made. So we really want you to think about how you can make a really nice, diverse team, both for the sustainability, but also for the knowledge and everything that can support the program. So when you're thinking about the team members, I also to think about the core pillars of Farm to School BC that we've highlighted, and how you can loop in the community or other people within your school network to be a part of this team. And also, I know that I've heard anecdotally from a lot of people that are running school programs that developing like a school culture around the program is one of the things that they say has led to the sustainability and the overall success of their program as well. All right, and just a few more slides here speaking to when you these are like broader, when you're planning your project, be really detailed, but also don't be afraid to use bullet points. So yeah, just list all the things on your mind in there, but don't feel pressured to have to be overly wordy in that. And one thing that I know a lot of schools have actually faced, sadly, is not getting all the necessary approvals before getting a grant. So I know a lot of schools have received a grant, they've been very excited, they want to go ahead with their program or project, but unfortunately they didn't get an approval at either the school level or the district level. So just checking in on those beforehand. And then keep your project simple with tangible outcomes. So again, if it's the 1K or 3K, this might vary, but just that's where really mapping out those goals, the key deliverables and those timelines to align to make sure that it is going to be something that you can achieve within the grant timeline, and also that the timeline aligns with the reporting period here, because often things can take longer than expected. And dream big and start small. I've heard this many times now from a lot of the different presenters and people that have been on the ground and been involved in a lot of these projects. And then also being a farmer myself, it's very easy to take on too much and to have that become so overwhelming that the project is not successful, which can be very discouraging. But if you start small and grow into it, it can be a way to success. And then just general grant writing tips, share responsibilities with teammates. Don't feel like you need to take it all on your own. And this is where downloading that application can really help to take it to the team and to really brainstorm and have people take on different responsibilities of different sections of the project. Keep your answers concise and think to yourself, am I answering each part? Because sometimes you just miss a few key words there. In general, when writing grants, using similar language as mentioned in the application, so that you ensure that you're aligning the process and the plans of the grant with what is being asked. And also accessible language. What I mean by this again is just don't feel pressured to have to be over wordy or using language that goes above what might be accessible to everyone. And also have someone else proofread it before submitting. And this is definitely something that I do because, yeah, it's very beneficial. You can miss a few key things. And last but not least, don't leave it to the last day. We've probably all been there before, but that can always set you back. And then we also just have our frequent asked questions sheet. This is linked on our grant site of our website. So this could be a place that you can reference maybe for questions that might be popping up a lot. But if there's anything in addition to that that you might not have been covered today in the webinar, but also not in there, don't hesitate to email myself at the grants@farmtoschoolbc.ca, and we'll share that email with you again to ask any specific questions. Anything regarding your application. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me go through all of that. We are now going to take some time here to go into breakout rooms, and Madison's going to set those up. And this will be an opportunity for you to ask questions with the Farm to School BC facilitators, but also just to share amongst yourself ideas or inspiration that you may have with your project or program. And your facilitators also, if there's any questions that might not be answered there, we'll take notes. And again, like I said, I'll be communicating back out with answers to questions. Welcome back, everyone, from the breakout rooms. I hope you had some great discussions while you were in there. We do have a little bit of time here before we have to part ways to back together as a group to chat a little bit more. So I know that Madison was taking some questions from the chat, if any did come in, that we could always answer and speak to now that we're all back together. But sorry.
There's just the one from Amanda that Marcus already answered. Does a school staff member have to be the lead and co-lead, or can it be PAC members? And the answer is the lead applicant should be a staff member at the school. The PAC member can be the co-lead.
Nice. Thanks, Madison. Yeah, and questions that I know that I've been seeing come up often is, again, more to that school to community connection piece. And so with that, our program in our mandate does support K-12 schools and education. So that's the foundation of where we want to support. So with that school to community connectedness, the application does need to be founded in the school, both for sustainability and for the program to continue to grow there at that school. So with that school to community connectionness, it definitely can be where you're co-applying and that community group is really supporting. And with that honorarium component of the grant, it can be up to 30% that can go to support that outside kind of honorarium for that expertise and engagement. But again, if the part of the grant is also supporting infrastructure like garden beds and soil and plants and stuff that is across the street at a community garden that the school is using, that the grant can support that even though the physical structures is across the way. And I know Sonia, maybe I can put you on the spot there. We did have a question in our chat right before our group left, which is a good example of this, in someone wanting to keep bees where their school would not approve that, but it sounded like there was an opportunity across the street.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. If someone wanted to know, like, should they still apply? It's a representative from their school who's asking this question. If they know that the bees won't necessarily be able to be kept on the school campus. And that's an example of if the team who's applying is coming from the school, like the main applicant is the school and the support teams from the school, but there is that connection with the community partners, like absolutely that's an example right there of where that collaborative work can happen, and just ensuring the sustainability of it, though, to make sure those community partners have an understanding and relationship with what will happen with those bees at some point if this champion leaves.
Yeah, and I know one school district we funded last year. We did fund them getting beehives at the school and some suits for the students and for extracting and harvesting, and they have dreams of harvesting the honey and bringing it into the school for tea for the students. And they've connected with a local beekeeper there who is kind of like that mentor and that lead that's going to come in and support them getting into that there. And did any of the other animators in the breakout rooms have any questions that were coming up, or just even really exciting or inspiring ideas or stories coming out of the conversations they'd like to bring forward to the group?
Hey, Roanne. I'm going to jump in.
Well, there. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No problem. I know when you're sharing the screen, sometimes it's hard to see what's going on the chat there, but I can keep an eye on it for you. Yeah, one of the ones that Gary had asked was in our breakout room was he was thinking about an expansion or a revitalization of their garden. And he was wondering, we had kind of talked about, $1,000 can typically be a good example of, an expansion of a garden or revitalization, but could it also be a 3,000? And it can. It just means it's going to likely be a bigger project. There's going to be more people involved. The expectations are bigger of the reporting, of the application itself. The timeline is longer. So, and we do that specifically because we're looking to learn from the process of what it means to do these gardens. So just wanted to point that out, that we're kind of making some recommendations of what a $1,000 or a $3,000 could look like, but it really can be a mix and match of many things. And it's more about the timeline and the expectations that surround these different grants. So just kind of, I thought that was just a good question and worth kind of bringing up again.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. And that also makes me think of a question I've received a few times as well, is if it matters if you apply for the $1,000 grant first and the $3,000 later, or vice versa. And it doesn't. It could go where you have the $3,000 and the $1,000 helps expand, or the $1,000 helps start something, and then the $3,000 one can help grow it further once it gets a little more established. Yeah, and if any other animators had anything to share, please feel free to do so. But we also have a few minutes if anyone wanted to ask any questions to us in the group, or share some really exciting or inspiring ideas and projects that they're working on or would like to work on, or ask questions from their fellow educators. No pressure at all. We can also just wrap on up because we are just a few minutes away from the end here at 4:30. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming and joining this with us today. And just a few things to go over one more time is the due date for the application is November 15th. This was recorded, so it will be accessible to watch again or to share to others that may not have been able to attend today. Again, just reach out to community animators, and if you don't fall within one of those hubs, you can reach out to me as an initial connecting point for support, and then we can go from there. And yeah, any questions, big or small? Also, if you aren't sure if your school is eligible, if they've received a grant in the past, just shoot me an email and I can let you know. So thank you very much. And if you want to go to the website, that's the website there. And we're also on social media where you can see some great, fun, and inspiring stories. Bye, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Ro.
Thanks for your support, Sonia.